think that's the story of this movie where yes, this is David Fincher's return to form, but with a wrinkle or two, right? Yes, this is very neat. This is very slick, a thriller, but it's not an action movie like the synopsis might tell you. It has a tight, simple script, which is shocking for David Fincher and Andrew Kevin Walker here. Very shocking, visually great. It has that dark that dark presence over it, like
Like
you know
that
what I'm saying?
shade.
Yeah, that shade over it, kind of that realistic, dark, grim feel around the David Fincher movie. It's back. The sharp editing, a strong lead performance, like we mentioned, but the story, it feels very familiar. It's elevated with Fincher and his crew that we like with the editing, the everything, the score, cinematography, but like it does feel familiar, and it's slow at times. I won't say flat. It's slow at times, and I like this movie. But yes, I do wish with my expectations going in, it was like I wish it was a little bit more creative. Maybe it's strayed away from the book a little bit that it was adapting from. It got a little unique and expanded some action sequences. But at the end of the day, it's like you have too many action sequences. Turns into like a John Wick type of movie, where this isn't a John Wick type of movie. Again, this is more of an elevated thriller type of movie, which I respect, and I think we need more of them. And I'll leave. I'll leave. I'll say one more thing before giving it back to you because I have a lot more thoughts on this, obviously. But again, like I think we're accustomed to seeing twists and turns from Fincher. You think of The Game, you think of Fight Club, Seven, right? This is pretty straightforward and simple, and you feel the story being linear, like possibly a novel, right? It even has the chapters laid out, and also it has the narration, so it just feels very linear, like you literally feel it. And I think that 62% of Rotten Tomatoes, that might be a reason why it's that low. It's because of that feelness, of that straightforwardness, that linearness, and sometimes not flat, but slower at times.
Okay. Yeah, it was a little bit slow. Okay. And that's kind of what separates it from, like, let's say, like another revenge franchise type of film, like a John Wick, right? There's other reasons why it's different than John Wick that I want to dive into. But I think that first scene, that first sequence, the first 20 minutes was so goddamn electric. I loved it so much. The introduction of the monologue, the mentality and getting inside the psyche of like the killer here. And then with that first assassination attempt, right? Or that hit that goes awry. I think from that moment on, it's kind of like sporadic on what scenes are coming at you. Like the pacing, it'll get pretty slow. Then all of a sudden, you'll get a scene with the brute, the guy from the Floridian, like that really packs a punch. Then you get some great scenes, like little downtime before you get to Tilda Swinton, little downtime before you get to like the final climax and all that. But I loved this movie, Ricky Flex. Right? I thought it absolutely kicked ass. And why I think it's a little different than John Wick, I think it's like if John Wick went through a midlife crisis. That was this movie. Like John Wick goes through emotional heartbreak right at the beginning, similar to this character here, but John Wick seems to grow stronger throughout and take on like a superhero type of mantra. And here, this movie kind of flips it on its head where it's like this guy has this tragic thing happen to his significant other, and then he has to get this revenge, but he's going against all that he stands for and what his business calls for and what made him so successful in the past, you know? So he decides like I have to go on this revenge tour, but he's not as sharp as like the characters you see like in a John Wick or like other like 70s revenge like thrillers, you know? That's what I thought worked so well. And that's why I also think the first scene was so great because I was collecting quotes that I'll get to, but he's saying like, make sure you keep your distance, make sure you trust no one, don't improvise. But what does he do after that first scene? Once he finds out what happens to his significant other, he's betraying everything that he's learned, all the procedures he goes through, all right? And what he goes through in order to exact revenge and when emotion takes a toll rather than it being about his work. You know, I thought this movie was genius in that regard. And for the monologues, that's so monotone. It keeps literally the same exact Michael Fassbender voice the entire time, no matter if he's cracking a joke or not, no matter if he's saying, I don't give an F. It's the same exact voice, but that's just who he is, right? When he's working, you know? I just thought it was brilliant how it set it up with that first 20 minutes and how what I guess came after the next right, hour and a half. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we mentioned John Wick a couple times. Like we're always rooting for the hero, right? And we're rooting for a good like coming like come like a super like a coming of not coming of age, but like becoming the superhero, right? Like he's the guy. We don't want him to make any mistakes. But this guy makes Michael Fassbender, the killer. I'll refer him as the killer because he doesn't have a name in this, like a true name,
Like the
which we'll talk about.
narrator, David
Right.
Fincherism.
Exactly. Yeah. But like he makes mistakes. This is a realistic movie. That's David Fincher. All these and all his movies, they're very realistic. That's why they have the look that they do. That's why they have like everything, the characters that they do. What happens sometimes a little out of left field, but hey, whatever. So be it. But I just think that's why like some audience members just maybe aren't clinging to this movie either is because hey, like yeah, maybe this has a happy ending, no spoilers, but like throughout it's like what are we rooting for? Like in general, like there's no like real connection to the love interest. We have one scene with him and Fassbender, or with her and Fassbender, but like it's like oh, of course we're gonna root for the guy that his love interest, a woman got beat up and he's doing revenge on. No, it's that's what we're doing, but usually it's like oh, like we're connected to her in some way, right? But we're not really. So I don't know. I feel like maybe that's why, but I agree with you. I think this is like very genius and something that we again, I like I said off the top, we don't see a lot. This like elevated type of thriller, and I think I honestly I think of Killing Them Softly. I like throughout this movie, I was thinking of that movie, right? Great movie, gangster movie, but like not appreciated because it's not a general gangster movie, and it wasn't really accepted by the general film audience. As a great director, Andrew Dominic, the cinematography, our shout out Greg Fraser, our boy, looks incredible, right? And there's some great performances: Brad Pitt, James Gandolfini, Ben Mendelsohn. But maybe it took some time for that to become like the movie that it is today, which is appreciated. I think this might take some time too for the general audience.
Yeah, it does struggle sometimes to hold the audience's attention. You know, when he's on the plane and you continuously see these different IDs, but when he is like interrogating a Charles Parnell, or he has a one-on-one with Tilda Swinton, right? Or he's taking on the Floridian, like those scenes really do pack a punch, right? And you just have to get through those connecting scenes. But a lot of times I thought they're helped by the sound work with Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross on the ones and twos. I thought they did an awesome job in this movie, right? Talk about matching like the gradient or the shade of like a David Fincher movie. All right, the dark underworld. Okay, and honestly, it's kind of interesting when you bring up John Wick again. Like John Wick, we also like as the movies progress, we go to 2, 3, and 4. He says less and less. Like you wonder how much dialogue that Fassbender actually had in this movie. It's few and far between, and the real things that are being spoken on screen is happening in his head, right? And that's where it's like also there's a little bit of meta-ness in my eyes, where it's like the return of David Fincher, the king of the psychological thriller. All the dialogue in the movie is happening in his head. All the audience can hear is what's procedurally going on in the killer's mind. I think also, right? It's a little pretentious, but I think it's also pretty cool, to be honest. I think he kind of nails it in that regard. Um, okay, where I want to go next. Oh, also John Wick reference. Talk about franchisability with these like revenge thriller, like Liam Neeson type movies as well. This movie, if it wasn't directed by David Fincher, and let's say it was directed by Antoine Fuqua, right? Equalizer fame, him and Denzel, you would say, okay, we can have a prequel here, we can have a sequel, and potentially a side tangent story. But because it's made by David Fincher, you don't say we're going to get a sequel to this movie, right? I think traditionally, if any other director is doing this, it has franchisability right off the bat. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I completely agree with that. I had a different thought though, and I had Antoine Fuqua in my mind as well. I thought if this was an Antoine Fuqua movie, Fassbender would have a lot more to say, right? You think of Denzel and Antoine Fuqua movies, like he always has something to say, and he'll have a big speech, right? He'll have a big speech and like a huge, like presence or not presence, like a I don't know, not an Oscar moment, but something of that effect where it's like, oh, I'm gonna remember that scene, and it's because like of this speech or something. Here it's like no, like this is all acting. Like it's barely any dialogue. If he does say anything, it's gonna be short and sweet, similar to like probably what it would be in real life because he don't want to incriminate himself or anything like that. So I think you're right where you would see the franchisability in a movie if it was directed by Fuqua, but also like you would see much more not campiness, but just that for the stage, like that for the stage moment, for the audience moment. No, this is not like yes, it's a movie, it's for the audience, but no, this is down to earth, realistic, dark movie versus like a Fuqua, which would be more for the general audience.
Doesn't really have that like popcorn effect aside from like
That's a
him
good way to put it.
fighting the Floridian. The Floridian, that's a popcorn scene, right? It's well choreographed, right? It's got like Fassbender exerting the athleticism, and you got the big man versus the small man, the type of scene you would see like in a James Bond movie a little bit. That's what you get in that moment here. But let's talk about Fast Train, because we talked about this as kind of a return to form for him. What do you think about his performance? I know you're a huge fan of his.
Yeah, I think you started off like he didn't have a lot to say here. I was just thinking throughout the whole movie, like probably like he's in like a recording studio doing all his narration, and Fincher's just down his neck saying like again, again, and he had to say probably like don't improvise, like stick to the plan at least at like I'm being dead serious, at least 1,000 times,
Probably, yeah.
just to get the exact wording and the exact sound Fincher wanted, right? And honestly, for someone that's been out of the game since 2019, this is a tough role and a tough director to come back to, right? Yes, he's with Taika Waititi next week, but like for him to do what he did here, right? To be with a commanding, obsession, perfectionist director, right? I'm very impressed. It was also a very physical role. Fassbender again hasn't acted, just been in a race car. I guess that kind of helps, but whatever. He commands the scene. He has a presence, and again, he's like literally in every scene. And if you could cast anyone to play a perfectionist, you would pick Michael Fassbender. Think of Steve Jobs. So I think this was the perfect role for him. Really, yeah. The detail-oriented, diligent, organized, robotic. Like think of Prometheus when he's frick, what's his name?
AI,
Kevin?
he's David.
David, thank you. David, thank you. Yeah, it's just perfect role for Michael Fassbender was this, and he won't get any accolades. He won't get an Oscar nom, but I think this is one of the better performances of the year.
Yeah, his voice performance with the monologues, I thought, is exactly what was needed for the movie. It's not the most exciting thing. It sounds like he's on an audiobook, honestly. Sounds like he's the audio. He should honestly, he should do an audiobook of the graphic novel. I think that would be perfect. Like
why
hasn't that been done yet? But I think that you're right. His presence, like you need someone that could chew up the screen because he's in every scene. Every single scene he's here. Okay. And that's hard and demanding for a guy who hasn't really been in the mix, But in terms of like what we usually see Fassbender do, what he's so good at, he plays like a serious person better than anybody. What we see in Next Goal Wins, what we're about to see next week is an anomaly from what he usually does. Like traditionally we think of him, right? Very serious and Inglourious Basterds. Very like he's Magneto, Shame. Like he rarely cracks a smile. And the entire time here, you get the wide-eyed Fassbender, procedural, cold, calculated. You see how cold he comes off in a movie like Steve Jobs, like you talked about. This lined up perfectly for him. To go back to what he's comfortable with and what he can do well, David Fincher is arguably the best guy he could have worked with, even though he's obviously oh so demanding. You know what I'm saying?
Like someone that's going to command 100 takes of a scene, that's going to whip you back into Oscar shape sooner than later, right? That's going to get you back into acting shape. So, yeah, like this is, again, it was bold to say, you know what? I've been off for 4 years. I'm going to work with David Fincher, probably the most grueling director to work with, right? Again, also physically. So it was a big swing, and I think a home run.
Going on with his performance, I want to get your thoughts on the narration because it seems like a lot of people are considering it monotonous. They get tired of the tone. They want to hear more from the actual character. What do you think about the decision to have him narrating pretty much 75% of his dialogue in the movie?
So I don't think it was bad before I start. I thought it worked. It goes along with a lot of the dry humor that's throughout this movie. And I think it works well with like in the first scene, the first 20 minutes when he does miss and then he goes, oh, that happened. Oh, that never happens. And then it goes right after and he's like, F, like, I thought that works really well. Right. But yeah, like by the time they're in Florida, I did get the feeling I was like, all right, like, I think I would kind of want to like be more compelled to this quest, this revenge tour, right?
Mhm.
And if we're just getting that through narration the entire time, I didn't feel as connected as I thought would be by that time by that point in the movie. But again, like I don't think I think for other people it would work perfectly. For me, I think it works. I just for me, I personal preference, I wouldn't have I would have liked more from the actual character.
Yes, I think that it would be great if we got a little more backstory, maybe with his significant other. But I think from what we know, I think that's why the first scene is so important and to pay attention. And you're asking a lot for the audience to kind of like hang on the every line of the narration in that first scene. But you see how tired he is of his job, right? How focused he has to be, what procedures he must follow in order to like get out scot free and then take care of the responsibility. It just tells me like he looks forward to that time when he gets to go back to the escape of the Dominican Republic and the comfort he finds in his loved one. Like when you watch that first scene, you're like, there's no way he has a loved one back home, you know? And so when you see like that escape, that one place he can go is taken away, that's where I'm just like, okay, I'm in on this revenge tour because like this is the one place he has a place to resign to, and it's now been infiltrated. The one spot he felt like he could be safe. But there's also some lines in the narration I just want to point at. All right, we'll keep it spoiler free for the most part, but it sets the table for his character and what him going against his procedures, against what he's used to, because of the emotional weight, right, upon his loved one being attacked. But he says like keeping distance, avoiding contact, avoid screams and broken glass. All of that happens later on in the movie, fails to do all of those. He says, I'm effective for one reason. And it's one of the great mic drops of the movie. I'm effective for one reason. I don't give a right? But guess what? Once his loved one, right, is harmed, he does give a right? That's where you see he's not as effective. That's why I think the narration was so smart in that first 20 minutes. It's just easy to kind of get bored by it. But I think like the writing itself was very smart and I think deliberate and effective in my eyes, despite like the monotony of it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think those are great points. And I just think that overall, like as you get through the movie, there is less narration. The first 20 minutes is a lot, right? I think it's going to what you're saying. It's kind of introducing us to this character, the role of a 21st century assassin, what this type of person has to go through nowadays, and giving us some sort of backstory with this character, even though not a lot, right? But I think as you go throughout, it's very clever what they do, where it's like it excludes narration in a lot of his actions. For example, like on the plane, it never tells us like, oh, he's gonna reschedule his flight to a different flight because of that guy who's following him, perhaps, right? And then it doesn't tell us like, oh, I'm gonna put the glass underneath the handle and then put the the plate underneath it, so that, or whatever. So then I could hear when I sleep the glass breaking, someone breaking in, right? The narration isn't giving us like a play-by-play. It's more like a TV broadcaster rather than a radio announcer. And I thought that was so well done. And that's why I think it works. I just don't think it's for everybody. And for me, it was hit or miss for the most part, for my personal preference. But it works.
A little bit like a golf broadcaster. You know, that's what it
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
felt
go.
like.
Yeah,
You know how they
that's
always
good.
have the low, same tone, right? Whenever they're speaking, unless it's a very explosive, like 18th hole, round four on a Sunday at Augusta. You know, we don't really get that moment, but it's always, it feels like it's the last group of the day on Thursday going through their 18 and you're just going the entire way. So I get how it kind of lulls people combined with those plane sequences, him traveling and all that. But it all pays off in my eyes. And I think we had some amazing sequence here, Ricky Flex. Are we okay if we jump into some spoilers here? Is that all right?
I think so. I think even if you didn't watch the movie and you listen to this too, I think you're fine.
Sequence wise, spoiler territory. I want to get like some of your favorite moments here. I already brought up the intro scene. What also I liked about that, along with like getting a vibe of like what this character is in a work-like environment and how smooth it is, how you see the athleticism of Fassbender, you see him stretching and him being able to put his head like all the way down to his legs. I was just like, this guy looks like he's a trained assassin, really fits the vibe. He's very slick with it. There is some great needle drops. There's one great needle drop before the first attempt at the hit, and it's Song from the Smiths. And there, I thought also this was also, you saw the sound editing like at its peak a little bit, where you have him put on the headphones, or at least you get a tease for the rest of the movie, and how it's so loud. Everything is so loud whenever they pan away from the killer and they go out through the window, and you have I wrote down the name of the song. I gotta say the name of it because it's such a great movie needle drop song. Before like a David Fincher like first kill in a movie. Let me find it. Sorry.
There's so many of the Smith songs, it's hard to remember which one it was.
I wrote
How
it
soon
down.
as now, maybe?
I think it's that one.
The Smiths. Pretty monotone band. A lot of the time. Fits with the movie and the tone of the movie too, and the character.
When the camera goes on him, the music focuses as well. I thought that was really smart. And so when you have that final shot and then that getaway sequence, I thought that was an electric way to start the movie. I think that was easily, along with the narration, um, top three, I would say, sequences.
Yeah, the specifically even after the missed shot when he's going through Paris, that was a very crisp, clean edited scene. That was like it's not a chase scene, but it's like a chased motorcycle scene at the
Mm-hmm.
same time. Very like very nice. That was beautiful to look at.
And when he misses, it kind of shocks the audience. Like when he isn't successful with the hit, because this guy seems like he's done this a zillion times. It seems like he has mastered this craft. And this, we're going to get to it eventually, is like, was he actually good at his job? But it just felt like this guy has killed how many people? He's talking about different ways that he's devised their death. He's talking about, have you ever heard of a quiet drowning, right? He loves when he poisons people, right? It's quick, it's easy, you can get creative. And so it's just getting in the mind of the killer. That's where it felt like super David Fincher to me. Um, Aside from that, I think we should talk about the segue sequence because that was slick as hell, right? How quiet that scene is, right? With the police surrounding. And then you have the smoothness of a fast bender on the Segway, turning away, okay? Going down staircases, him turning down and going through these really small cracks between buildings. I just thought it was smooth as hell. And the editing in those scenes I thought was on another planet.
Yeah, and again, like, is he good at his job? Like, I think he's clearly good at his job. Like throughout this first 20 minutes, when you're like, he's walking us through everything. He's very detailed and he's very knowledgeable. Genius, really, not genius because he says he's not a genius, but like, he's freaking smart. Like, he is smart. He just made a couple of mistakes here. He's human. I think he's a normie, as this movie would say. And the segue scene, kind of showed like, yeah, this guy's legit. Like, this guy might have made a mistake, but he's still legit. He's still like going away from the police at the same time, or avoiding it is the word. But he's like going up on these railings, on this Segway. He's doing these jumps. Yeah, this guy is legit.
Yeah. I guess you brought it up. So I think we got to talk about whether he's good at his job. And you say he is, or at least he was good at his job. You know what I was thinking is that he kind of just has the yips, right? When he makes that first mistake, he's like, it's just a domino effect. And then he has like the loss of his significant other, and then it just sends him in a downward spiral. And he kind of loses control of his abilities a little bit, right? He can't throw it back to the pitcher anymore, Like I made a list actually of all the mistakes that really stood out, Ricky Flex, and it's a pretty long goddamn list. So obviously he kills the dominatrix, right, during that first hit, fails. Then he kills Charles Parnell in another great scene with the interrogation scene because he thinks he has more time to interrogate him, right, as he's losing all this blood, but before he knows it, he's dead, right? So it's a mistake again. Him, Tilda Swinton, one-on-one scene, ends up almost gets sneakily stabbed. Right, one of the famous quotes from him is "Trust no one." Okay, almost helps her up. She sees that he finally shoots her in the head. She had a knife in her hand the entire time. Right, and he doesn't make that final kill at the end of the movie when he confronts the person that hired to hit him in the first place and was also gave the final go ahead to tie up the loose end that was the killer. So time and time again, he keeps effing up, but he's lucky enough, right, to kind of get out of these situations because he's kind of the man. But just that him to be able to get out of all these situations tells me he used to have it. He's kind of just at the end of his run. This is like his final tour, right? His Somerset last week, in Seven. You know, that's him in this movie. But I'm not willing to say he was bad at his job because he did make it out alive, and then he did what he had to do in order to exact revenge.
And it still was pretty easy for him to get in these situations, right? He just kind of made his life more difficult doing it, like he times the door closing with the Charles Parnell death, the 7 seconds, right?
You hear him
He
counting
still,
too. It's narration. It's good.
and he still kills the secretary there, but it's not a disappearance. That's a mistake. She should have disappeared, but he still gets the job done. He just did it a little difficult.
But what was so good is that he snaps her neck to make it look like she fell down the stairs so her family could still recoup the insurance.
Right. And again, it's still a mistake because it should be, it's still a mistake because she should be disappeared, dump her in the river or the ocean or whatever, but he still gets the job done. He still makes it look like an accident, right? So there's a bunch of others too, and you listed a bunch of them. I think overall though, it's like you're right. This is like the hero at the end of, or the star player, maybe not superstar, but star player that, what, maybe he did one season too long.
It just seemed like he went cold. It was like Peyton Manning when his arm just ran out somehow in his last year with the Broncos, but still managed to win the Super Bowl. That's exactly what happened here. Last scene I wanted to talk about, Ricky Flex, I want to get your impressions. The action scene of the movie, where it felt like we kind of went full John Wick, and we felt like we went full franchise action movie with the tracking down of the Floridian man, the one who's working alongside Tilda Swinton, and tries to take out, or basically puts his significant other, the killers, in a coma, nearly. What were your thoughts on the scene, Ricky Flex?
Yeah, this is the scene of the movie. I think some people would say the Tilda Swinton scene, but this is the scene of the movie. If you're watching this movie for the assassin, for the action sequences, this is it. And this guy who, it's in Florida, you could really feel the presence of Florida in this movie. It was the, stereotypical Florida in this movie. They go to the trashy casino. They have the weight bench outside. You can feel how hot and humid it is. You can see the dog outside barking at him. He's trying to drug the dog. He can't drug the dog. And then out of nowhere, this guy's an absolute animal. This guy is a beast, just throwing Fassbender around, and like not like in a slow hoof. It's like a boom push back against the wall. Fassbender, awesome scene. And again, you mentioned earlier the editing of this scene, unbelievable. So it's also really dark, classic Fassbender too. So yeah, this scene for me, I think, was the best scene in the movie.
This scene would have hit in a movie theater if it was on a big screen, and that's the sound, like the him slamming against the wall, through the table, all the sound that's happening is just action sequences. It kind of reminded me a little bit. Both the big guy reminded me of two scenes with Dave Bautista, actually. One being the first scene of Blade Runner 2049 with like a skinnier, athletic Gosling, almost like a Robotronic Gosling, just like a replicant style Gosling.
Good shout.
Against Dave Bautista, and then also like James Bond against Dave Bautista and Spectre on the train. Like I felt like Dave Bautista should have just been in this scene, but he's a little bit on the older side now. But I just couldn't stop thinking of those vibes, and that's the most franchisey I've ever felt a David Fincher movie aside from Alien 3.
I would say so. Like definitely. Like
him flying across, it felt like John Wick when he flew across and then he just landed. Like that probably would have broke his back, after I witnessed that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like he goes down the Saturday stairs, whatever the heck you call them, and it's like, oh, he should have broken all his bones. Oh no, but he's fine. It just has a little limp. Fassbender, same thing here. He should have probably broke his back. But also, I also just want to mention the dry humor as well coming through this scene, whether it was with the dog or it's with the cheese grater, right? Like, it's great. It's great. It's consistent throughout the movie. It kind of felt like this movie was ramping up throughout. Like you had the front scene in Paris with the mishit, and then you have the mini chase or avoiding the police segue scene. You have the scene in the Dominican Republic, kills the taxi driver. Yeah. Then you have New Orleans with Charles Parnell and the secretary, and then you have this boom, like true action, like mano a mano. Like you actually have a formidable foe to go up against, right? And again, like he makes his mistakes. He's not like he doesn't like look behind him. The other guy is a trained assassin as well, so you got to kind of take that into account. He doesn't really do that mistake again, but overall, the actual choreography great in this movie, great in this scene.
Yeah, he's got the size and the reach on Fassbender, but him taking him down is that's like the franchise feel to it. Uh okay. And I also wanted to say the Floridian Man, one of my like questions about the movie, why is Tilda Swinton with him down in Florida? Like she's not a killer of any type. And I think this Florida guy could figure out if he just has the coordinates of where he is. Like, why is there's just not another henchman with him or a hitman of his stature? Like, why is Tilda Swinton, this like 60-year-old Q-tip woman? That was another funny shot from David Fincher in the script here where he calls her like looking like a Q-tip. I'm like, that's what everyone says about Tilda Swinton, you know? But I thought it was weird that she was the one that went with that man to the Dominican Republic.
So I was thinking about this too, and the only thing I could think of is again, like when you look at these chapters, it's the location and then the person. Her thing was New York, really wasn't New York City, but it was in New York, Beacon, and the expert, right? So she's like kind of the brains and he's kind of the bronze. But I do think she is an assassin too, like or some sort of killer as well. But they had to hire like a combo team in case like they had to kill another assassin. You just go, okay, we got to make sure we kill this guy. So we send two down there, right? And someone that's really smart. That's kind of how I was thinking about it, but I had the same thoughts as you. I was kind of confused about it as well until the Swinton playing an assassin. She seems kind of on the older side, but she
Yeah.
does look sleek in this movie, so who knows?
Yeah, it seems like a miscast or like someone you would see unexpectedly as a hitman in a movie, or you need a little star power to go with it, or you need
I
someone that could pack a punch one on one in a serious Fassbender scene or dramatic
that
Fassbender scene.
that's definitely the reason. Because if you look back at another David Fincher movie, Benjamin Button, this had those vibes with Brad Pitt and Tilda Swinton and Benjamin Button kind of talk about the meaning of life. This was the same thing with Fassbender, just in a it's not Benjamin Button, it's the killer.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good shout. Okay. Any other thoughts before we get to the scores?
All in all, like this movie is really good. I highly recommend it. Again, I'll just say what I said off the top. This movie isn't for everybody, but it could be in time. I feel like this will get not a cult following, but like I said, sort of killing them softly, like it will get appreciated over time with the general audience. So I like this movie a lot. I just kind of a segue, not to go with the scores, but I don't think this is like a top echelon Fincher, but this is a back to form Fincher. Like we're back on the right track.
Yeah. Well, we already established at the beginning of this podcast he doesn't miss, right? He doesn't miss with this one. Weirdly, I did mention how that scene with the Florida Man would have been great on the big screen, but I think in another way, this is not a bad movie to release on Netflix because of some of the lulls that happen in this. It feels like you could have this on your iPad and you could be cooking dinner and you could be listening to the monologue, but then you can sense when there's going to be a build towards a major action sequence with Michael Fassbender. Then you turn and watch, I don't think it's that bad of a movie. We obviously want to promote movie theaters and we like Netflix is kind of our enemy at the Drive-In Podcast, along with all other streaming services. Make movie theaters cool again. But I think it's not a bad one to have on like while you're making dinner, right? Or you don't have to pay attention as closely because you're looking for those explosive moments with a fast train. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I actually go a step further. I could see this being like a TV series.
Yeah.
The
Oh yeah.
individual chapters, different settings each time, 6 episodes, quick, easy out.
Yeah, it'd be interesting because Fincher's never made a sequel. He has made TV before, but he has never made a something that's associated with IP aside from Alien 3, his first directed movie. But like he's had movies made after like his initial creation. For example, like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and the failed sequels that came from that film, right? Already a well-established book, right? Fincher known for adapting, right? A lot of different books, right? With his projects, a graphic novel here. So it's something where I actually wouldn't be too shocked if there was like another story to be told, maybe like a TV show that goes into a prequel style of the killer. Totally can see that happening where Fast Bender is not really associated with it whatsoever, and David Fincher isn't. But like if this is the #1 movie on Netflix in like 88 countries. You know, like this is a massive movie for their streaming service, at least according to their metrics. So, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if we got like a prequel series of any kind there.
Yeah, I just don't think it would be a Fassbender, like you said. I could see it. You could definitely see a spin-off of some sort.
Okay, scores. What do you give The Killer?
This is a tough one. Tough one. I've been bouncing around within a 5-point scale all day. I'm gonna go 84.
Oh shit, I had 84 as well.